So I had the opportunity to talk to Alex Camilleri, the director of LUZZU, which was one of the films I saw at the Sundance Film Festival, probably my favourite of the festival. So keep an eye out for that whenever it pops up elsewhere on the festival circuit. It was filmed in Malta, and it follows a Maltese fisherman and his attempts to kind of maintain his way of life in the face of modernisation and personal troubles and various other things. Alex himself is a Maltese American. He filmed it in Malta with non-professional actors, and I think it's an extremely good, extremely effective film. I was very pleased to get the chance to talk to him, and we'll go into the interview now. And I started off by asking him about the locations in Malta and why he chose the places he did, because it's very striking, some of the visual contrasts that he comes up with. So, first of all, thank you for the film. I really enjoyed it. It's stayed with me for quite a long time after watching it. I wanted to ask you to start off with about the location. Now, obviously, like Malta is obviously very, very close to your heart, but I was thinking on a more specific level, because one of the things that stood out to me was the way that you kind of contrast the very small scale in terms of the world, but obviously the stakes are very high, trials that Jesmark goes through with some of the stuff around him, like contrasting LUZZU with, he's having a conversation with his wife with that kind of like the container ship looming in the background, and that sort of thing. And there were lots of little moments like that stood out to me, and a lot of it came down to the location stuff. So I was wondering how did you come up with the locations in Malta that you wanted to film at?
I love locations. It's my favorite part of the whole process. And they were so intrinsic to this project because I wasn't just writing a sort of black box drama. I always knew that just as I was articulating things very specifically through the characters, I would also be trying to do that visually through the world. That's the kind of the primary tool that we were working with. And because we were shooting on a micro budget, essentially all on location, the physical environments become all that more important. The Maltese sun in October is brilliant, and so you basically don't have to change your f-stop for about 12 hours, and that opens you up to being able to point the camera anywhere, and you just can make something really good out of it, quite readily. So I had some very specific locations in mind while writing. So that shot that you highlighted about the container ships while they're having that conversation, for instance, that was just baked into the script from the get-go. And these are just places that I know, but that are also just familiar to anyone who is accustomed to Malta. And where my perhaps job, my role comes in is to take those locations that everyone sees every day and just give them meaning, put them into a context to elicit the emotions. And that's the director's job, like a chef. Combine these ingredients in the right order, in the right combination, at the right intensity, and you can elicit something that goes beyond the everyday. And these locations, as I mentioned before, they're so commonplace, and everyone knows them. And often what I find in Malta is that people look away from them. You sort of close your eyes, not literally, but you would ignore them in some sense just to get through your day. They're not the most picturesque parts of the island. And I always feel like I perhaps bring a freshness of view because I'm both an insider and an outsider to Malta, that these things haven't yet lost their impact on me as they might if I was fully
every day.
Thinking of them every day and running into them every day. And I would have to put them out of my mind, just like I do here in New York City. There's probably an amazing street that I ignore because I have to walk through it and the pavement is cracked or whatever, and I don't like it. But there can be a specific kind of beauty in it, and in the right hands, of course, that beauty can come out.
Talking about things that were baked into the script. I was wondering, how did you decide when to insert these little nods and moments to things? You know, because there's a discussion with, you know, the fish market boss about environmental concerns, and it you know, it's there very briefly, but it kind of informs a lot of things that happen in the interaction with that character. But things like the cost of healthcare, the precariousness of migrants, you know, because you've got Uday on the boat and things like that. How did you decide when to put them in the script? Because they all kind of get their own moment. None of them are lost, but they are all there. There's quite a lot of ground covered. So I'm really just wondering how you decided to pace and measure that out in the script.
I knew from the beginning that there were things that I wanted to say, but all of the things that I want to say have to be sublimated to the drama. And I'm interested in the world, and I want to have my eyes open. I don't want to make a nostalgic film. This is not about some romantic idea of what the life of fishermen is like. And to get all those things in, it's tricky because you don't want to make an issue film, and you don't want to feel like you're preaching, and everyone gets turned off by those things, and I certainly do. So I think that the best way to go about it is just, you know, make sure you're telling everything through a strong perspective. And this film is focused like a laser on Jesmark. He's in every scene but one in the film. And as long as I think information is being parceled to the character in a believable way at the right time in his journey, then I think the audience accepts it. And, you know, I think you just have a little bit of patience and trust in the audience that, okay, even if you don't need to begin with a topic sentence and then underneath it, give all your points. Sometimes, you know, you're just getting a little bit of a hint, and then we don't get to that stuff about climate change really until maybe 3/4 of the way through the film. And you have faith in the audience that they're smart enough that they don't need to be kind of told what are these forces that are lurking in the background and putting, you know, all these pressures on Jesmark. And you know, if you have that faith, the audience will reward you. The conventional knowledge, of course, is that you're not smarter than the audience is smarter than you, and I find that to be true. And I'm kind of surprised about how much we get into the film. Maybe it's too much, I don't know, but yeah, I mean, we get into climate change, we get into EU regulation, we get into migration, we get into racism, we get into politics a little bit, you know, but that's also, I think it matches the film. That's the project of the film, and it's in a genre in a way that you know, the audience is going to accept it if they like this kind of film, and it's part and parcel in the style. So I think we can do it.
One thing I want to ask you about, just because when I was looking up who worked on the film, it was just an interesting link to me. Now maybe it's because I'm British, but I mean, it reminded me quite strongly of Ken Loach's work. And of course, once I go digging, I see that you were working with Leo Lefebvre, who of course has worked with Loach. I was just wondering, how did that link come about? How did you end up working with him, and in particular to form the way the film looks? Because of course it informs, you know, kind of the whole tone and mood of the piece. And there's quite a lot of, like, even though, like, as you said, that, you know, the Maltese sun, you probably had a lot of daylight hours. There's a very varied look. So I was just wondering how you ended up working with him, and what work you did to come up with the look of the film, really.
Well, I'm as Ken Loach obsessive, and I think certainly he and of course the films with Paul Laverty are a big influence on this. I can't deny that. But I was delighted, you know, when I met Leo. That wasn't the first thing that I knew about him, but it was an unexpected treat because he was part of the camera crew on 3 of the recent Loach films. And somehow that language spoke to me. I wasn't sure that was the exact cinematic language for this film. I was thinking about Loach a lot, you know, kind of in the writing more so than in the directing and the mise en scène and the cinematography. But it was great to speak to Leo, just to know the ethos, for instance, on those sets. You know, what is a day like on a Ken Loach set? I just loved hearing about that. But even, we could look at scenes specifically if we did want to reference them. And he was an amazing resource because there was, you know, I could just ask like, okay, what lens are they on here? And where was the camera and where was the crew tucked away? And he just had all the memories of how they actually did it. So that was awesome. But, Leo had a lot else to bring to the table and had a strong documentary background too. And he had recently worked on a film in Algeria that was also a very small budget film with a lot of heart and kind of in a difficult sort of unconventional cinema environment, right? So those combinations made him the perfect guy for the job. We developed a style, first kind of theoretically talking about things that we liked, and we loved so many of the same films beyond just the Loach films. And so it was very easy to get started. And I think we thought that we might try to shoot a bit more on the tripod, like Ken Loach does. But it's important that you have your eyes open once you get on set. And we realized the way that Jesmark moved somehow, that the tripod wasn't doing him as many favors, and that he kind of had a different energy, and we needed to go on the shoulder a little bit more. So we ended up, combining more handheld with tripod. And Leo is very adaptable, and he's a very skilled operator and can kind of do everything. So that was a wonderful moment for me, just as a first-time filmmaker, to be like, okay, it's cool to come in with plans and to be very intentional, but you got to wake up and be like, if this plan doesn't work, let's change, and let's be alive to what's being fed to us here on set.
On the technical elements, and so this is your first feature directing. You got a lot of editing experience. Do you feel like that changed the way you shot things, or were there specific things that maybe your editing experience informed what you were doing on set, or even during the writing process potentially?
I hope so. I mean, to speak about set first, yeah, I mean, I think the conventional kind of wisdom about sort of shooting for the edit is valuable. In some ways, at times you do have to let out, you have to kind of let the slack out a little bit. You don't want to shoot too tightly. You want to, well, I guess it goes both ways. You were talking about the edit. In one sense, people might say shoot for the edit, meaning just get the coverage that you need. And in that way, I think I had a strong sensibility of like, what are the shots that we need to cover? Like, I think I used like every setup we ever shot in this film. Like there were no extraneous setups. Like that didn't really ever happen. But, I also had a background in documentary, and that informed a different sense of shooting for the edit, which is sometimes you just got to shoot stuff out, and what you're trying to do is you need to get a lot of lumber, and you're going to go home and you're going to build a little house for yourself. But, if you don't get that lumber, you can't build the house. And, sometimes we just needed to let it roll. I'm thinking about, for instance, a scene where there's a group of old fishermen and they're all chewing the fat, talking about stories and griping. And I mean, it was really just like a documentary shoot. And, we just did various passes and put the camera in different places. So I guess that is similarly informed by editing and knowing when to switch the gear about this is the type of material we need here. And then in this other place, okay, we don't need to do that, but let's be smart about what the coverage is. I'm really grateful to the background in editing. I think it's tremendous training for filmmakers, and it's a bit surprising, and people have picked up on it, to be honest, that I did make a transition from editing to directing. I think because it's unusual, and I'm not sure why it's so unusual, because editors are really, tremendous storytellers. They just get to the heart of like, what are the shots you need to tell the story, and that is valuable in directing.
One thing I want to ask you about, and I've been asking a lot of filmmakers this, who I've been interviewing in the past, year now, basically. What are your hopes for the film during this period? Because you've in particular premiered at Sundance during this particularly strange period when it's basically all happening remotely. We're talking about a film that screened at a Utah Film Festival, and I'm sitting in the UK and you're sitting in New York, and we're from, to a certain extent, we're pretending that this is all normal. But I'm used to seeing things at a film festival where often the filmmaker will be standing at the back of the room, kind of like keenly studying everybody's reactions, because it's the first kind of like big audience that has seen the film, and obviously you haven't really had a chance to do that. Are you hoping to try and get that at some point, or and what are your hopes for the film off the back of that, in terms of like is it playing at more festivals? Is it going to, do you just want people to see it any way that's possible, or a little of all of the above?
Yeah. Well, by this point in the pandemic, I have a certain humility about these things that we can't project too far into the future. I think it's fair to say that at some point this year, things are going to get better. And I hope that coincides. I hope that coincides with physical screenings. I'm dying for it. Not only have I not seen this film in a room with 300 people or 1,000 people, I haven't seen this film in a room with 1 or 2 other people, right? Yeah. That's crazy. And for a young filmmaker such as myself, you do miss an opportunity to do what you were hinting at, which was study the collective body language of the audience. I mean, that's, it's too late for this film, but it helps you in the next film. You learn where the laughs are and where are people getting restless. That really informs your sense of rhythm and how these things play in a room. And sometimes the jokes can't be, not that there are many jokes in this film, but for instance, jokes can't be too close to each other. If people laugh, they miss the next one. And those are the things you can only get a sense about with seeing a live audience. And I just think that experience is still really valuable for us. But I'm grateful to be working with a tremendous sales team, and we are kind of charting out the rest of the year for festivals. We're hoping to just go on the road with it, so to speak, the virtual road. And at some point that'll give way to, physical screenings. And I hope that I can pop up at one of these festivals, and most importantly with my cast, because they do such tremendous work in this film. And I think it's really important for people to understand that these are real fishermen. With all the messaging that we've done about this film, it's still amazing to me that I'll read reviews that say, oh my God, I had no idea that they were actually real fishermen until I saw the credits or I saw the Q&A. And I think that's a credit to the work that they do in the film, because there are like good non-actor performances. And I think we all kind of know what those are. And then there's what, Jusmark and David do in this film, just amazing performances, and no one would be they're none the wiser that these guys had never been on camera before this film. It's tremendous.
To finish off with, I suppose, I'm keen to see what, with the experience of making this film, do you have an idea of what you'll work on next? And if so, are you looking to do something with the same sort of approach, where it's all very, it's very grounded maybe in the community it's representing, and you'll work with folk who have not acted before, or maybe haven't acted a lot before? Is that an approach you'll look to carry forward, or did you feel that was just what fitted this particular story?
Well, I mean, I really enjoyed working in this way, and I'm developing my next film right now. It brings me back to Malta, and it is actually using, again, some similar techniques, but charting in a different direction. Okay. So I'm going to work again with non-actors and mixing in also some trained actors, set in a very specific side of Malta that most people don't know about, but in a completely different emotional register, different tone, different kinds of characters. And I think it's really going to surprise people.
All right. Well, fantastic. I look forward to seeing it, hopefully in person.
I hope so too. I think it'd be actually a very good film to see with a big group of people. It has that kind of energy.